And what happened to that? Because it's a large public-private partnership that did not come off. But it also deserves to be examined because it would have had a tremendous impact on this country. Some say positive, some say negative. We will see. Some of the thematic things, I'm a surveyor. So where I'm coming from, we are the science of measurement. That's what surveying is. We are the science of measurement. And where I'm coming from, I believe we need to have our bearings correctly, to use some surveyor language. We need to have our bearings correct to know where we're going. One of the big pieces of bearings I have is about how we behave as public officers. Vaughan spoke earlier about it, and Robin spoke earlier about it, about the question of the standards of making decisions as public officers, making decisions about awarding contracts and so on, evaluation. David will speak about evaluation tomorrow. But the standard that guided us writing the procurement law and in preparing our approach to this thing is really the standard of how we treat with public money. Public money is actually what we used to call taxpayers' money, and public money is our money. We use a male-centered term, patrimony. It's the country's money. It's the treasury's money. It's money for the generation who's not born yet. It's money for our grandchildren. It's money for our children. It's not your money or my money. It doesn't belong to this elected prime minister or that one. I'm going to try not to be too party political. I will already try, okay? Now, the global standard as far as I'm concerned, and of course there are people here who could correct me, including Dr. Margaret Rose and my other colleagues. The global standard as far as I'm concerned for the treatment of public money is the Sharman report of 2001. That's Lord Sharman from the British House of Lords. Those of you who are accountants or lawyers may be familiar with the work. He prepared a report, a leading report called Holding to Account, in which he was looking at the whole question of how public money is dealt with in the UK. They don't call it public-private partnership in the UK. The phrase over there is the PFI, the Private Finance Initiative. And there were a lot of concerns because we have these government bodies and quasi-government bodies, they call them quangos in the UK, that are using up public money, and they have all kinds of governance standards. Don't believe it's only in Trinidad and Tobago or only in the black countries. It happens over there. And they were so concerned, they appointed this group to examine it. And the leading thing that Sharman found, which is what we relied on to give us some of our bearings, is that public money is different from private money. A $10 note that comes from the treasury looks the same as a $10 note that comes out of your wallet. But they're two different things. The money that comes out of your wallet is your money, and you could decide what you want to do with your money. Whether you want to buy food or you want to buy a pack of cigarettes. That is your choice because it's your money. And we live in a democratic society, a capitalist democratic society. You could decide what you want to do with your money. The money that's in the treasury, the same notes, with the same color and the same ink and the same picture of the queen or the king or the prime minister or whoever, that money in the treasury is different money. That money is extracted from the population by a lawful process we call taxation. That money is extracted involuntarily from the population. And because it's extracted involuntarily, the public has the right, the ingrown right, as to how that money is spent. And that money is to be spent properly. Because as I said earlier on when I was signing up over here, it's our children money and our grandchildren money. It's not our own to play the fool. Your money in your wallet you can play the fool with, because that's your personal choice, right? The essential finding of Sharman was that public money is to be treated to and accounted for to a higher standard than private money. That is an essential piece of learning. Now, what does that mean? It doesn't mean that we think the private sector could do no wrong, because goodness knows a lot of wrong things take place there, which I'll be going into later in my talk. What it does mean, in terms of what is the meaning of Sharman's finding, the meaning of it is that the good standards, what in professional life we call best practice, the best practice of the private sector is what should be applicable as a minimum standard to how we treated public money. For those of you wondering, what is the rule of conduct? That's the rule of conduct that guided us in writing this law. The second thing when we come to projects now, the first thing is just about the money. The second thing when it comes to projects, I remember going to a lecture at Hyatt Hotel. My colleagues at the Project Management Institute, the Southern Caribbean chapter, invited me to a nice 2-day conference. They had something like this. I was just a guest. And the main speaker was this guy I have a saying up here, Harold Kersner, a white American guy. He's a professor of project management. He worked at NASA and all kind of high-grade places. And Kersner, at the end of his speech, like a comedian giving a punchline, gave this tremendous piece of learning. He said, you know, when we think about projects, those of us in the project management field, whether it's construction or non-construction, when you think about projects, we often talk about cost overruns and projects that run over time, yes? And projects that have safety issues or health issues, yes? And to criticize projects. But in fact, the true project management professional understands that the only failed project, there's only one type of failed project, and that's the one where you didn't learn anything. So it was an essential recognition of learning at the center of what Kersner said, and I take that to guide me in what it is I'm doing. That's the only failed project, the one where you didn't learn what the mistake was, and you didn't learn how to do better. So that is the spirit we're coming with today in terms of this discussion this afternoon. So the 3 projects I'm going to talk about are this one, which is, at the time, was called Hilton Tobago. So Tobago Plantations was being built. In fact, as a little vignette, you have little nuggets along the way. A little vignette is that this hotel was actually opened in November 2000. So it's a kind of happy coincidence, or maybe not, that we're standing here in November 2025, and it's like the diamond jubilee of this property as a hotel, okay? And it's the first time, as far as I'm aware, in Trinidad and Tobago, the two islands, that we experimented as an investment and tried to put up a large-scale, quotation marks, a resort. Because the Hilton in Trinidad is not really a resort, it's a business hotel, yes? The Hyatt Hotel down by the waterfront, that's our next business hotel with conferences and things, yes? This was the first time we tried in our country. I'm using a collective we, Trinidad and Tobago, with all the mistakes and everything, to put up a large-scale resort. So it was an important experiment for examination. The land, I'm going to call some figures because I deal with figures. You can put up that slide now, Novak. The land, in 1997, they incorporated a company called Vanguard Holdings. And Vanguard Holdings, expanded please here. Vanguard Holdings paid $12.6 million for this land. It's a 20-acre piece of land. $12.6 million, that's a registered deed up there. Okay? The land wasn't cheap. The construction, we can go back to the slide, thanks. The construction was originally supposed to be 170 million TT dollars, 170. But in fact, there were some crazy escalations of about 82%. And I'm using we because all of us pay taxes, we ended up paying $309 million to construct the building. So the land was 12.6. We went through that just now. The construction was $309 million. That construction ended, as I said, around 2000. It opened in November 2000, yes? The land was leased in 97 from Tobago Plantations. Took 2 or 3 years to build and so on and so on. By 2006, not to make a joke of the location, but the project was taking water to the point that they put the property for sale. And the property was put for sale at one of the leading hotel specialists in real estate called Hotel Solutions International. Hotel Solutions International is known in my profession because they're one of the world's top firms in terms of valuation of hotels globally. They have the most amount of experts, the highest degree of expertise in that firm. They also do large-scale real estate of hotels, marketing hotels. The asking price, I know you just had your lunch, but we have to deal with facts. The asking price in 2006 was 22 million US. So in 22 million US was the asking price. Now, you know the real estate. If the asking price is 22, they'd probably take 20, right? Everybody has big people. $22 million is about 150 million TT. So within 6 years, just on a crude back of the envelope thing, We're doing a scientific valuation here. We don't have time for that. 50% of the value had been lost. So we had spent 12.6 plus 309, so it's 321 million of our dollars were spent. But the asking price was now 150. Hilton fight up with them for a little while. Hilton was still here. And eventually in the first part of 2008, it was around March of 2008, Hilton handed back the key. At that point, Dr. Rowley was the Minister of Trade within Mr. Manning's cabinet. Because just to be perfectly clear, let me stick a pin and stick a little note here. This hotel, its conception and its construction was not a conception and construction of a PLM government. I said I wasn't going to be political, but I'm going to say some things here. And for all of the criticism I'm making, my information from people who were involved is that the actual conception and how they actually attracted Hilton to the table was a fairly well-transparent process. They decided they wanted to build a hotel. This is the previous administration, Mr. Basdeo Pandey, the late Mr. Basdeo Pandey. They decided they wanted to build a hotel in Tobago. They put together a board. We talked about Vanguard, the Vanguard board, Vanguard Holdings. That board advertised internationally, not in the Guardian and Express and thing, internationally, that they want to put a hotel in Tobago. About a dozen people sent expressions of interest. That's the professional phrase, right? You all are procurement people, expressions of interest. They shortlisted it down to 6 or 7 people. And they had what they call a beauty contest, where they invited them to come here, they showed them the land, they talked them through it, people explained what their approach was, what their network was. And out of that process, Hilton was selected. So just as a footnote, because the conference is really about procurement, as a footnote of fact, in my opinion, a proper and a transparent process was followed. The result was terrible. And we're going to continue now, okay? So Dr. Rowley get back the Hilton keys. And he kept a press conference, 29th of March of 2008, where he actually explained that the private sector parties, and those private sector parties, we have to name them, which is Angostura and Guardian Life. Guardian Life is who built here, the whole plantations. And Angostura was also in part of the partnership. The private sector partners had not been maintaining the property the way they had promised to, which is part of the reason for the failure of the building and the property as a hotel. And a short while after, it would surprise you all to know that Hilton was able to get back all their money. So we're discussing a public-private partnership as a concept and as what to look out for. This was a public-private partnership. What we call in the legal language a special purpose vehicle was created. That's Vanguard Holdings. And there were different shares in Vanguard. The state at the outset had less than 50%. The state had 47% shares in Vanguard. Hilton had a portion, Guardian had a portion, Angostura had a portion. And when the thing went bad, and let us go back to 2006, with that $22 million offer on the international market, 22 million US. Obviously, there were no offers. You see how bad the thing was? Because people were sending people down here to look at the property and measure the accounts and so on. Obviously, there were no offers, which is how come they ended up coming to the government. And the government of the day, which was Mr. Patrick Manning and Dr. Rowley, was Minister of Tourism, of Trade. They took the decision to absorb the loss. So they paid for Hilton's shares, 138 million was paid to Hilton. It's all in a very detailed thing. I'm writing a chapter in a book about it. Very detailed. 138 million was paid to Hilton for their shares. The private shareholders were paid off as well. So the government now owns 100% of Vanguard. The state, in fact, because the government can't own anything. There's a little mix-up between the government and the state. Now, since then, we have news that $390 million has been spent repairing this place. Another $390 million. This is coming from the Minister of Trade at that time, which is Paula Gopi-Schoon. She spoke, I think, on the 19th of March, 2018. She was speaking in the Parliament. She was questioned on it. And furthermore, The losses to Hilton, she was giving a 10-year synopsis between 2008 and 2018. She was speaking in 18, yes? The losses that this property lost, Magdalena, was 276 million TT. Okay? So we have a kind of grim balance sheet. And the last part, which is really the bitterest part, is that there's a fellow called David Small who was in a parliamentary committee. And David was asking the question as to what had gone wrong here. E-Tech was being questioned by a joint select committee. And David was able to read from whatever figures E-Tech gave them that for every dollar that this hotel makes, the government has to spend $1.68. It's as ridiculous as that. Okay? And that's why nobody would buy it, even when it was offered at half price. So it's in every sense of the word a failure. And at this point, we have to invoke, we're going to invoke some things here today. We have to invoke the whole question about the sunken cost fallacy. We talked about that the other night. The notion that we have gone so far and we spend so much money and it's too late to turn back now. And if you look at this project, it started 25 years ago. And every chapter, now the information has been concealed. Yeah? By and large, people concealed and change information and so on. I have been able to find it by years of research. Every chapter you snap at, there's a greater loss and a greater loss and a greater loss. And the question is, how are we going to turn it around? What are we going to do? What do we do? Because it's our responsibility. And it's not your responsibility, THA, but we are all citizens and paying towards it. And this is part of what your taxpayers' dollars go for. Okay? To keep here running. And of course, this begs the question, because the public-private partnership in this case was meant to be one in which the company that was incorporated between the four entities, the state, Angostura, Guardian Holdings, and Hilton International, those four entities were the shareholders. That company is the company that leased this land, the 20-acre piece for $12.6 million. That company is the one that entered the contract to build the thing for $309 million. That company was meant to be turning back a rate of return. And the state, as a shareholder with 47%, which is the largest single shareholder, they weren't the majority, but they were the largest single shareholder at the table, was supposed to be getting a share of profits. But as we have gone through, there was no profits. It was one of those things where there was never a profit. There never has been. In fact, I'll tell you something else. The UNC senator, which is what he was at the time, Tahaka Obika, back in 2018, asked 3 questions about the hotels in Trinidad and Tobago, the state-owned hotels. He asked about Hilton, Hyatt, and Magdalena. I wouldn't focus on Hyatt and Trinidad Hilton, but that's beyond the scope of this presentation. But he asked, what were the taxes paid? And what were the dividends earned by the Magdalena Hotel? And what's interesting, if you could bring up that part, no, the table with the figures here. What's interesting is that, I think it's the next table along. The next one along, yeah. Yep, financial analysis, yeah. What's interesting there is that we discussed a lot of unfortunate decisions and losses to the public purse. But as far as I'm aware, PAYE, pay as you earn, is a statutory obligation in our country in the laws. If you have a business and you're employing 6 people, you have to pay the taxes, deduct the taxes from them and pay the taxes. And according to Paula Gopi School, in the 4 years that Tahaka was asking the question for, no PAYE was paid. So we have a situation where there's no, I don't know if people are having their salary deducted here, who work here. But according to the minister, speaking to Parliament, no PAYE was paid for this property. So I consider that to be a bit of a loss, given the fact that they were proceeding under a kind of metric to say, well, listen, we didn't make any money in profits, but we're making money in taxes. This is the discussion that Paula Gopi School was promoting. These are the figures here. Thanks, Novak. So what we see is a decline. the total taxes fell from about $7.1 million in 2015 to 3.9. There's nothing for PAYE. Of course, there's no corporation tax, so they have profit of zero. So there's no corporation tax. And the hotel accommodation tax is the only one where there appeared to be some performance, but even that one, there was a steep decline. I'm going to pause on Magdalena here and ask the pregnant question. So we started this experiment in the year 2000, November 2000. We have these different, what people like NOVA could call data points. We have these data points along the analysis. And we have these conclusions, preliminary conclusions. How does this, which really, really happened in our country, how does this inform future investment decisions? My position, based on my research, is that we have not, you really will find out what you want to know. We have not initiated any formal research into this. We have a THTI, Tobago Hotel and Tourism Institute, up in Blenheim there. We have a department at UWI, part of the Department of Management Studies, which is part of the School of Social Sciences. And they have a whole department in UWI dealing with tourism management and policy and so on and so on, up to the master's level, MSc and postgraduate diploma and so on. They have similar divisions at Mona and Cave Hill. You have a business school, the Arthur Lockjack School of Business. My good friend is chairman there, Mariano Brown. When is anybody going to do research into this, apart from me? When are we going to get a serious piece of research into what went wrong? What was the feasibility test that approved this project? Was a feasibility test performed? Who performed it? Are we still using that firm? Have they been rejected? And more to the point, how has this failure informed our future decisions? Because we'll come to that when we come to Tobago Sandals. The second project, I'm going to pause on Magdalena there. The second project I want to speak about is the MILSHIRV project, which is the one on the corner of Shervan Road and Milford Road, near that new roundabout. And MILSHIRV is pretty important because a lot of serious issues surface in MILSHIRV. So MILSHIRV occurred while the People's Partnership was in power and the PNM was out of power. PNM was in power in Tobago within the Assembly. And this project emerged. It was born big. It emerged fully formed. So it was an unsolicited project that emerged fully formed as a complex project to put up a new office building at the corner of Milford and Shervan Road. I think it's a 3-acre site. And Rahel Holdings would build the building, and the Tobago House of Assembly would rent it at a fixed rent, which is the essential framework of the agreement. There were some extra bits, like bits of cherries on top. So the Tobago House of Assembly agreed to buy the land from Rahel for $12 million. I mean, I don't know, for goodness sake, I don't know why. Normally, if a developer owns land and they want to put up a building, they would approach you and offer to put up the building and negotiate a rent with you. But in this case, it was necessary. And in fact, it happened that the state paid $12 million for this land. The $12 million valuation is not overvalued or anything. It's a good valuation. I don't know why they did it, though. And Rahel put up this building, the MILSHIRV building, for $143 million. And the allegation at the time, the concern coming out of the People's Partnership government, that a very aggressive Attorney General, that was Mr. Anand Ram Logan, Senior Counsel, was that in fact the transaction breached 2 laws or regulations. The first one that was alleged was that the transaction breached the Central Tenders Board Act because the Tobago House of Assembly is obliged to put its tenders through the Central Tenders Board under the arrangements that existed at that time. And secondly, that in fact, as a financial arrangement, the Tobago House of Assembly was also obliged to obtain the approval of the Minister of Finance under regulations within finance. The loan, which Rahel borrowed money to build the building, the loan came out of FCB, for Citizens, yeah? And Mr. Ram Logan appointed Mr. Alvin Fitzpatrick, senior counsel, to take the lawsuit, to litigate. And the Tobago House of Assembly appointed Mr. John Jeremy, who's now our Attorney General, to defend the litigation. And what's amazing is that the very first hearing that they had, you know, there's this thing we have to be careful what we wish for, yeah? You know that old-fashioned saying, be careful what you wish for, you might get it. What's interesting is this. We live in a time of political turmoil, where they're looking at TV about what happened in America, looking at what happened in our parliament here, what happened in Jamaica, whatever the situation, there's a lot of political turmoil. And sometimes it seems like people just making confusion for the sake of making confusion. They're not really making a point. They just want to make confusion and to be on the news and so on. And therefore, because we live in this confused time, we welcome, very seldom we get a consensus that both sides appear to agree on something. Very seldom. When we see it, we say, gosh, you didn't see this is really nice, and it makes you feel okay that maybe things could get better. But you have to be careful what you wish for. Let's talk about MILSHIRV and the political consensus among the so-called enemies. So when Ram Logan appoints Fitzpatrick and the lawsuit is filed, boom, they call a meeting. Not in court, somewhere else. I don't know where they met. But they met somewhere. And they had a discussion. And they agreed that the actual contract, the actual public-private partnership, the lease and so on for MILSHIRV was not going to be examined in court. So the both parties, I want you to listen to me, the PNM people, which is the THA and Mr. John Jeremy, and the UNC people, People's Partnership, which is Mr. Anand Ram Logan appointed Mr. Fitzpatrick. Both of them agreed before the first hearing that we're not really going to talk about that. The lawsuit was supposed to be a lawsuit for the High Court to interpret whether that contract broke the law in the two ways I explained earlier. I gave you all the outline earlier. What they agreed, to use lawyers' language, they converted the litigation to an interpretation summons. So they were merely asking the court whether if in fact a public-private partnership was entered into by the THA, no particular address, whether that would be in breach of the Central Tenders Board Act. And whether if in fact a public-private partnership was entered into by the THA without consulting the Minister of Finance, whether in fact in such an imaginary case that would be a breach of the financial regulations. As we say in Trinidad and Tobago, sorry Robin, and sorry Andre, the papi showed the whole thing. Yeah, that's what they did, the papi showed the whole thing. So in the first meeting they kept, the meeting none of us knew about, because we are just citizens, you see. They agreed that they're not really going to discuss the lawsuit. And I'll tell you something that's interesting. As much as they didn't discuss it, because that has a meaning. I'll talk about the thing and then I'll talk about the meaning of the thing. As much as they didn't discuss it, in the High Court, the Appeal Court, in both of those courts, the court found that both of those laws were broken by setting up PPP. When it got to the Privy Council, they removed one of the two things. I think they removed the one with the Central Tenders Board Act, and they focused on the Minister of Finance and his regulations for the approval of capital, blah, blah, blah. And the Privy Council also found, even in an interpretation scenario, that that was also a breach of the law. So 3 for 3, they went down hard. Now what does it mean? That was the thing. The meaning of the thing is this. We live in a liberal capitalist time, and you have to be careful that they don't steal your mind. Because what is happening is this. We are witnessing a phenomenon we call financialization. Financialization is a scenario where finance gets to be more than just philosophy. It's more than just people saying they want to be rich, and they want to win the lottery, and they're buying a quick pick and all of that stuff. We all grew up with those things. Your rich uncle died, and we know those things. Financialization is actually the biggest, richest fish in the ocean deciding what you will and you will not talk about. What you will and you will not put in court. You wouldn't put my business in court. That's financialization. And what happened in that case by Mr. Ram Logan and Mr. John Jeremy and Mr. Fitzpatrick agreeing not to discuss the matter? That was financialization. Everybody in the room was big people, and everybody agreed that was too sensitive and too important to leave that in the hands of the court. More lessons. So that's an example of what financialization is. More lessons. So when we examine in procurement structures, and Margaret and them give lectures on this, one of the features of a good procurement structure is to have independent oversight. Yeah? Independent oversight. And I want to put it to you that the courts represent independent oversight. Okay? The courts in our country represent independent oversight. But the cautionary note here is that, in fact, if the parties agree, if the schemers agree that they don't want to discuss that blue napkin, even the court with all of its power, because the court could go to the point to hang a man. The court in this country has a lawful power to hang a man. But even with that power, when the bigger heads decide we're not discussing that blue napkin, the court could do nothing. The court had to bow to the bigger heads. And that is financialization too. So when we talk about independent oversight of procurement, be fully well aware that there's still danger in that long grass. And the last thing I want to say about financialization, because it runs like a thread through the whole analysis. And in fact, it should run like a thread through your work as professionals coming into the field more and more strongly as this law takes grip, is the whole question of interest. We live in a time where a lot of people are not financially literate. They're not economically and financially literate. And therefore, you find that the cost of interest, the cost of a financial arrangement, and the cost of interest are issues that are either never discussed or they're submerged. In the case of Magdalena, we talked about Magdalena earlier on, there was a bond for $17 million to build here. I have never been able to find out the interest rate. What was the interest paid on the bond? I don't know. And I am a diligent researcher. In the case of this building, of MILSHIRV, it is $143 million Rahel borrowed from First Citizens to put up the building on the land. The THA bought from them for $12 million. When you work out the figures within the loan agreement, because I've seen that loan agreement, it's $315 million they would have paid back to FCB. And the interesting thing to note, just now I was speaking about the bigger heads agreeing that something is not going to be discussed, and how that could actually prejudice even an independent court system like the one we have here. And I mentioned Mr. John Jeremy, who is now our Attorney General, was a lawyer for the THA at that time. I also want to mention the point, because when we talk about anti-money laundering and KYC, and know your customer, you already know some of those phrases. There's a concept we talk about called a politically exposed person. And a politically exposed person is somebody who is so very, very important because of their rank, their station in the society, the position that they hold. That when they walk in the room, any room, people come to them and say, Chief, what you want? You want anything? And try to sort out things for them. And this case is a manifestation of that. Because when I wrote the chapter, it didn't happen yet. Mrs. Prasad Biseta had not been elected Prime Minister. Chapter was written in March. But Mr. Hawaii was already a PEP. Because he went from being head of the bank, remember that? The same bank, FCB, to being Minister of Finance. So he was the Minister of Finance. Check the jokes. It's not a joke, it's a true joke. He was the Minister of Finance, wrote a letter to the Attorney General, telling the Attorney General, please don't pursue this lawsuit. There's a letter, I have the letter. because innocent third parties could be harmed. Now, as head of a bank, the bank making a loan for $315 million, I could bet my hand, as I say in Calypso, that how Hawaii fully well knew about the loan and was in those meetings when they negotiated the loan. And Mr. John Jeremy, at that time, when I wrote the chapter, was 2 times Attorney General, 2 times High Commissioner of London. He's now the Attorney General. Mr. Hawaii, of course, is now the governor of the central bank. For those foreign colleagues wondering who he is, he's the governor of the central bank now. So there's 2 ultimate examples of PEPs coming to the fore, and the question of an independent judicial oversight being prejudiced or compromised when the bigger heads decide we don't want to discuss that blue napkin. You could want to discuss it, we're not discussing it. And they could push it to one side. So we have to be alert and continue to develop systems. The systems we have here with this new law, they're very good. They're not perfect. There's a piece of work in progress. I continue to support the efforts Margaret and Vaughan and the other colleagues are making. The last thing I want to talk about, the last one, which closes the circle, we come back to the hotels. We talk about Tobago Sandals, the one that didn't get built. Okay? So when the PNM was returned to office in 2015, September, one of the early announcements was that Sandals was coming to Tobago, and everybody heard that. And it was well supported by Dr. Rowley and Mr. Stewart, young other people. We also know that the Tobago MP at that time, as she was at that time, Shampa Kajo, was the Minister of Tourism at the time, and she's the one who signed the MOU. For those of you wondering, who signed that? Shampa Kajo signed it October of 2017. And I litigated to get it because there was a whole mix-up about it. On the one hand, it wasn't a secret. And it was above board, and they were just in discussions. On the other hand, they couldn't show it to me because of blah, blah, blah. Eventually, I took them to court and I got it. And people, it's the most frightening, lopsided agreement I've ever seen. We were given Sandals, a beautiful piece of land down by no man's land down there. We were going to design, build, fit, and furnish the whole resort for them at our expense. The document is on my website. We were giving them a tax holiday. You can't make this stuff up, you know. They could have obtained as many work permits as they wanted. If they wanted 1,000 work permits, they could have gotten it. That's in the agreement. They could obtain as many as they want. There's a feature with how multinationals deal with small third world countries in particular. A nasty feature, a tax evasion thing that they call transfer pricing. So those of you who are accountants familiar with it. So you pretend. You speak up very well, very well. Well said, counsel. Yeah, you could pretend. For example, there's a company, one of the European multinationals that pretends this pen, this cheap pen that PC World, this pen is in fact manufactured in Trinidad. They buy it from a company in Trinidad and Tobago, and they pay $1,500 for each of these pens in an attempt to evade taxes in some other part of the world. The Sandals MOU contained clauses that recognized and were protective of Sandals' right to establish associate companies in other countries and use those associate companies to facilitate transfer pricing. That's what our government in this country signed. And that's why I was against it so much. And that's why when it was published, they dropped everything and ran. They didn't want it because they had negative publicity, and they didn't want it because of this, and they didn't want it because of that. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. That's why they didn't want it. I want it. Okay? So the question, it comes back to the same question. We started off in this building. Hilton Tobago, now Magdalena Grand, and the history of this building coming up 25 years. And with dancing with a proposal 5 years ago with Dr. Rowley and his government with the Tobago Sandals. And the question is begged, did we learn anything? And there were other experiments with Trinidad Hilton and Hyatt, but as I said, that is beyond this conversation. The sunk cost fallacy is part of this conversation. The sunk cost fallacy. You look it up, those of you who don't know it. Or the sunken cost fallacy, look it up. Very important piece of learning. Yeah. The Sharman report, holding to account. Very short report, very important learning on how public money is to be treated. In fact, I'm happy to tell you all, when we did the procurement law in this country, our definition, SHARMAN, our definition of public money is more modern and more comprehensive than what Sharman had. We have gone a step further to try to protect the public interest because we care about our children, we care about our grandchildren. This is our country. We ain't going anywhere. This is our country. This is a very serious piece of work. It's not perfect, but it's a work in progress. Where did I get to with time? I'm about, 42? Okay, 9 minutes ago. Okay, fine. Right, so I can pause here. I mean, I could go on and on. And I could ask you all if you have any questions. Thank you for your interest. Okay? And if you have any questions, I'm happy to try my best to answer them. Okay? So I'll pause here. Thank you. I'm going to get a sip of water. Excuse me a minute.
Any burning questions from the staff of Magdalena? Where's your PA? Where are you going? Anybody?
Is it too political?
No. Any kind of technical question, I can answer that.
A question on this side here.
Good afternoon. My question is, by the way, do you by chance have any information relative to the arrangement with Lloyd's of London that is now taking place in Trinidad and Tobago relative to our Port Authority?
Yeah.
Sorry, I have no idea what you're talking about. What is it about?
Yes.
Oh, investigation.
Is insurance for what?
For the port.
Insurance, it's actually introduction of a massive cargo and passenger vessel. They are supposed to be taken
for the port here?
Yes.
Right.
So that is what I'm asking, if you have any
I don't know anything about it.
Well,
No.
something for you to...
Oh,
My hands
you
are
can
full,
work.
but thanks. Thank you.
You can work.
Yeah, I never heard anything about it, honestly, yeah.
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 Burning. Are the tea stations still open? There's butter available. You can have some. No?
Okay, my editor just says to me, I should tell you there's two separate chapters. There's a chapter on Tobago Sandals, and there's another chapter that analyzes all of the state-owned hotels. So you get Magdalena, Hyatt, and Trinidad Hilton analyzing one big chapter together. So, thanks. And Sandals is the first of the two chapters here. And that should finish in the next week or two in terms of writing. Sure.
Right.
This lady in front there.
Right.
You have a question too, right? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So I heard about the this thing with Magdalena.
Yes.
And what I heard was the toilets was the wrong toilets. There are people putting the wrong toilets, right?
The what, sorry?
Toilets. They installed the toilets. I heard about the toilets getting installed was the wrong toilets.
I didn't know anything about that.
Right.
In this building?
Yes.
Okay, keep
this
going.
Magdalena,
Sorry,
right?
I wasn't hearing you properly here. So they installed the wrong toilets, yeah.
So with this Magdalena is like a public place, right? How is it? Because the hotel industry I don't know if this is a 5-star hotel or if Sandals is a 5-star hotel, but how can we fix this hotel up to standard and, do better with it?
I mean, the answer to the question really is that to fix this place, and that's a very loaded kind of answer, to fix this place will cost a lot of money. And the question has to be on what basis would a banker lend money to this project? It's not bankable. For every dollar that they make, they have to spend $1.68. So the accounts are not bankable. That's why after 2018, which is 7 years ago, they've never published or had any statements about the accounts of this place, despite my looking and looking and looking. Okay? The only way this is going to be bankable as a project is with some kind of a guarantee. And what in the world of finance they call a sovereign guarantee, which, to put it in plain language, the government going to have to underwrite. If they need to borrow, let's just make a figure, $100 million to fix up the place. It's going to be the government underwriting that again, which is more politics. I mean, it's starting to get warm now. More people. So that's the best answer I can give you. This lady has a hand up in the dark top, and then this lady has a hand up.
Good day.
Yes.
Were you able to examine the financial projections in the original proposal document?
For this property?
Yes, and what did you find?
No, because the question you're asking, this question you're asking is absolutely pregnant. From the first time I wrote about this, which was back in March of 2008, when he was closing down on Dr. Rowley, was speaking to us on TV. At that time, he was Minister of Trade, which is the first time I put pen to paper about this. I've been asking that question. Who did the feasibility test? What were the financial projections? Was it a firm? Where did we go wrong? How is it you could build a place? We took a 10-year bond from Citigroup to build here, $17 million US. 6 years into the bond, the property is put for sale at half the price. So obviously it collapsed. What in the world of finance and management they call delta. The whole thing just delta. Bam! They X themselves out. How did that happen? Who was being held responsible? And we never got an answer, really. We got the whole thing. So the answer is I don't know. I tried to find out, but I don't know. And I've been asking, and I'll keep on trying. And this lady has a question.
Afternoon. When you were referring to the Sandals proposal, that your comments would have been pertaining to 2019, the proposal from 2019.
Well, the Sandals, just to be correct, as insofar as dates are concerned, the Sandals agreement, the actual MOU that was signed by Shamfa Kudjo, who was Minister of Tourism at the time, she signed that in October of 2017. Dr. Rowley and his cabinet started speaking about it, saying, look, Sandals is coming in the early part of 2016. So they had been elected in September of 2015. In the early part of 2016, they started speaking about it. The actual agreement was signed in October 2017. It was disclosed to me at the end of 2018, the 29th of November. And by the 15th of January of 2019, Sandals had said, we don't want to do it again.
Because earlier this year, we started hearing talks about them
You
again.
put the microphone here.
Sorry, earlier this year, we started hearing talks
Yes.
about them again. And they're saying that they have changed the proposal to alleviate the concerns about public funding, and they're going to use their own funds.
Yeah.
But so what's the status of that now, if you have any information?
Well, all I know, in terms of what I could remember, is that it was on the 15th of March, 2025, when Dr. Rowley it was a Saturday, Dr. Rowley was at Crown Point opening the new airport. Okay? And in that speech, when there was a crowd assembled and he was giving his speech to open the new airport and so on, the airport terminus, in a kind of Pekongish kind of way, he pointed down at Farley and Watson Duke and said, you all don't block the thing this time, Sandals is coming back, and so on and so on and so on. And of course, by the Sunday Rowley stepped down as Prime Minister, he handed over to Stuart Young. The Monday, Young was sworn in as Prime Minister, and the Tuesday they called the election. And the whole thing passed. I think Stuart, the son, came here once, but the whole thing kind of disappeared. I think that was like something resembling a stunt. I don't think it really was a real thing. Because I didn't hear anything more about it. Just like you, I didn't hear anything more about it. It's like 2 or 3 little things and it went away, you know. Robin has a question over there. Yeah. Yes, Robin.
I was just going to say that in the UK, the PFI, it was done to take the debt off the balance sheet
Yes.
of the UK government
Yes.
so they could borrow more from the markets.
Absolutely.
Yep. So
Himself suited himself.
and it's failed. Oh,
Yeah.
well, it didn't fail
It's a
in
big
that.
failure. It's a big failure. I know. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. It's a huge failure. Absolutely. Absolutely agree with you. Absolutely. For this lady has a question. You're the finance secretary, chief admin. Good to meet you.
Mr. Raymond, I'm expressing my thoughts out loud so that you could assist. What do you do when government invests in a physical structure like this?
Yes.
It's not generating any profit.
No, it's not.
No one wants to buy it.
No.
What do? Leave it for goats and chickens to occupy? What do you do? Do you as government say that we have a duty with respect to employment and all of that, so we'll keep it to generate employment for persons? Because we will have a lot of projects like these where we know that we can't consider past costs because it's sunk costs.
Yes.
But how do we move forward with something like this?
Yeah. That's a good question. That's a political question. Eh? That's a that's a very political question. A good question. What do you actually do with these things? It's a commercial question. I can tell you, a company wouldn't keep something on their balance sheets that was hemorrhaging this amount of money. But the government is not a company. As Mia Motley said, Barbados is not a company. She was speaking to Sandals, because they were trying to get a 40-year tax holiday from her, and she stood up against them, okay, in her first budget speech. So it's not a company, but we need to find a way to cut it, somehow cut it, change it to something else. But you can't continue, because that's what you did for the last 25 years. It doesn't make any sense, you know? And we have to show something. All of this education our parents sacrificed for, our grandparents, our forefathers, our foremothers. And this is what we end up doing. We have to behave like edified people and behave better. And if it is something that's not working, find a way to move away from it. I mean, ultimately that's a question for people like yourself and the...
Yeah.
I know who you are, yeah. I got
So-
it now.
So I have a question. Are
Sure.
there any successful public-private partnerships in Trinidad and Tobago?
I would say so. Yeah, they have some. They have some.
Yeah.
I'll call a few examples. So, for example, Cabildo Chambers, which is, for those of you who may not know Port of Spain that well, is at the corner of St. Vincent Street and Sackville Street. It's a kind of gold, garish-looking building opposite the Red House. It was controversial about 3 or 4 years ago because they built a bridge from the Red House over to it, across St. Vincent Street. That building, Cabildo Chambers, was built by NIPDEC and leased to the state. Now, NIPDEC, contrary to popular opinion, NIPDEC is not a state entity. NIPDEC does not belong to the state. NIPDEC is a wholly owned entity of the National Insurance Board. The National Insurance Board does not belong to the state. The National Insurance Board has 3 stakeholders: the state, the business sector, and the unions. The state only owns 1/3 of the shares in the National Insurance Board. That is a private-public partnership that succeeded. Another example like that is a fraud squad building at the corner of Richmond Street and Park Street, opposite Scotiabank. That's another property that worked. The Ministry of Works building was owned by FinCorp, which is at the corner of London Street and Richmond Street. And I mean, this is my thing. I mean, yeah, they have a lot of them that did work, where people had modest gain, modest goals. The people at the table were fairly honest, and it could work. Unfortunately, when you get higher and higher up in the order of things, greed takes over and stupidness becomes the norm. And here we are having this discussion, you know? Sure, I think, Vaughn, look, Robin, I have a question again.
It's not a question, it's a reply. So the lady here asked what can be done. Yes, so I think there's probably 3 things to do. Better buying. So use third parties to do all the analysis for you. Get one of the big finance houses in to do all the analysis on the deal. So better buying, better negotiation, better contracts. Yeah, get all the details in the contracts that a private company would do, and better post-contract management. And with those 3 things, these things can work if there's no other political agenda around it. So.
So to continue on the same subject. Yeah, it's a bottom line, and you'll hear more about it tomorrow. But the way I look at things, any project of this type that's utilized public funds should be subject to review on a regular basis. I would suggest annually, especially those that are failing us, that are draining us going forward. And one of the options, one of the things we do in evaluation is we compare different possible scenarios. We must put disposal as an option. It seems as if we consider projects now, but absent the possibility of disposal. We need to start taking disposal seriously. We have huge amounts of assets, losing hundreds of millions of dollars every year that we don't seem prepared to address, as you say, because of this sunk cost fallacy. And let me close by reminding everyone here that the will has been found in the past. We did find a will to shut down the Petrotrin debacle at $12 billion. If we could shut that down, why can't we shut down other similar projects?
Yeah.
Colleagues, thank you very much.
All right. Yeah.